10. Al Sharpton's criminal brother. Pastor Kenneth Glasgow, the half-brother of the famous Reverend Al Sharpton and a voting rights activist in Alabama, went out to help somebody find their missing car. Instead of finding the car, he ended up getting hit with a murder charge. It happened back in March 2018. The pastor was driving around with a young man named Jamie Towns as one of his passengers. He'd been driving two unrelated people to a training session on voting rights when the young man asked for a ride. Jamie said his Monte Carlo was missing, so the pastor was happy to help him cruise around a bit and try to find it. They found it, but not in a good way. The Monte Carlo came driving straight towards them. It rammed into the pastor's vehicle. And then, Jamie Towns got out and shot the driver of the stolen car, a 23-year-old woman named Bruinia Jennings. Bruinia had a history of mental illness. The pastor ended up being charged under an obscure Alabama law that allows anyone complicit in a crime to be charged to the full extent of everyone else involved. When the police charged the pastor's friend with murder, they also charged the pastor. The only good news for Glasgow is the courts eventually cleared the pastor of his 2018 capital murder charge. 20 years ago, he served 14 years on drug and robbery convictions. Glasgow claims that being in prison inspired him to help felons get the right to vote, and he founded the Ordinary People Society, an organization that promotes several social justice actions. His problems aren't over yet. Again, he faces drug possession and other serious allegations in Dothan because of other unrelated incidents. 9. Death at the Credit Union. Sylvester Ofori was a pastor at the Floodgates of Heaven Ministries in Orlando, Florida. His followers called him a prophet, but the police call him a murderer. In September 2020, the police took him into custody and accused him of murdering his wife at a credit union. According to what the detectives uncovered, Sylvester and his wife, Barbara Tomei, were getting a divorce. The couple had been estranged for roughly 3 months. Then something went wrong just before 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. On Garden Parks Boulevard, where Barbara was working at the Navy Federal Credit Union, Sylvester waited. When his estranged wife showed up for her shift in the morning, Sylvester got out of his vehicle and opened fire on the poor woman. It was horrible, and she died right there in front of the credit union at the hands of her preacher husband. Sylvester was called a prophet. He called himself a prophet, and Orlando Police Chief Lieutenant Frank Cesari said he had a pretty big following on the internet. This is despite a long history of violence. Police arrested him in 2016 after a different altercation with his wife. He kept up appearances as an online pastor, and nobody saw the brutal murder coming. 8. Running down the deputies. Religious leader David Jones was facing criminal charges of attempted murder back in 2021. Police accused the Ferndale pastor of trying to murder deputies by running them down with his vehicle. And to make it even worse, the pastor was allegedly drunk off his rocker. Jones had been the pastor at Hilton Oaks Baptist Church since most local folks can remember. But despite being a respected pastor at the church, David Jones was frequently in trouble. This most recent trouble happened in early October at 1 a.m. The police were called because he was acting suspiciously at a convenience store. When they arrived on the scene, he refused to cooperate. He instead tried to speed away, but accidentally drove directly into the business across the street. When he backed out of the building, he then turned his car towards the deputies and rammed into their police cruiser. Kelsey Mullen, a local woman living near the church, said she was in shock by what happened. The community held the pastor to a higher standard than most other people in the neighborhood. Others are angry that a flawed system allowed Jones to walk away after so many times getting caught drinking and driving previously. This time, he won't be getting out. The judge sent Jones to jail and held him on a bond of $1 million. 7. The bad pastor. In early March 2022, calls began pouring in for the abuse hotline set up in Iowa by the Attorney General's office. Authorities set up the hotline so that people could phone in about what they viewed as abusive behavior coming from their places of worship. The calls that started pouring in back in March all had to do with the Christ Apostolic Temple in Des Moines, where a 63-year-old pastor married an 18-year-old choir girl. No law in Iowa prevents someone from marrying a girl that's much younger than them. The age of consent for marriage in Iowa is merely 16. Followers of the temple where Bishop Dwight Reed met the girl are furious, calling the pastor a predator and saying he needs to be removed immediately. Everything about this case is disturbing. Dwight Reed originally met the girl when she was 14 and he was counseling her divorcing parents. The family then joined the pastor's church and she, only 16, became a member. Some members of the church reportedly heard the pastor saying he had his eyes on the girl ever since the day they met. Not only is Dwight Reed the pastor of the church, but he's also the dean of its school. The allegations are that Dwight Reed used both his positions of influence to groom his new bride as she grew up, priming her to marry him immediately after her 18th birthday. There's a petition to ask the Day 1 District Attorney's Office and the local police department to open an investigation into the bad pastor. 6. The pastor with a boyfriend. In 2014, Alabama police charged a pastor with murdering his wife. According to prosecutors, the pastor had been in the middle of trying to leave the country to marry his boyfriend in Europe when his wife got in his way. His name is Richard Lee Shahan, 53 years old, when all this craziness went down. Information obtained through over 3,000 of his personal emails showed he was planning to leave America and never return. He was flying to Germany, would connect to Kazakhstan, and eventually land in the United Kingdom. It was never clear why exactly he needed to make so many stops, but his overall plan was to marry his boyfriend and get citizenship in the UK. The pastor's wife was Karen Shahan, discovered dead in the home they shared on July 23, 2013. An assailant had stabbed her multiple times, and she had evidence of defensive wounds from where she tried to protect herself from her attacker. It wasn't until the next year that they finally arrested her husband. In 2017, the courts cleared him of all charges and released him without ever being prosecuted. The prosecution couldn't come up with enough solid evidence to prove the pastor had stabbed his wife to death in their home. This may be speculative, but this guy probably killed his wife. He had $27,000 in cash on him when police arrested him at the Tennessee airport, not exactly a small chunk of change for a vacation. It's been a huge fiasco, one that ended with a sour taste in everyone's mouths. 5. The Snake Preacher. Pastor Cody Coots at the Full Gospel Tabernacle in Jesus' Name Church in Middlesbrough, Kentucky, had a close scrape with death in 2018. This chapel is one of the last surviving churches in the country where snake handling happens. During his sermons, Pastor Coots handles living venomous snakes as he shouts and preaches to his mesmerized congregation. During this sermon, the rattlesnake bit him right on his face. Blood splattered his shirt, the crowd gasped, and he kept on preaching. He said that God's a healer and that he would be fine. But he wasn't fine at all and had to be carried out of the church by his followers because he couldn't breathe. As much as we'd all like to believe in a higher power, a snake bite is a snake bite. First responders took him to the hospital, where he barely survived. And get this, his father, Jamie Coots, died at the young age of 42 when a rattlesnake bit him. It happened during a sermon at the same church in 2014. A snake bit him on the hand, similar to how one had bitten his son on the face, but Coots Sr. never lived to tell the tale. And this is one of the reasons serpent churches are few and far between in America. 4. Risking it all. FaceTime videos exposed Pastor John Gray as a cheater in early 2019. The next year, in 2020, the South Carolina preacher once more got busted, stepping outside of his marital vows. Viewers caught him accidentally posting more videos online that he was having with his mistress. One video was of him telling her to bring a two-piece swimsuit for a secret vacation. Another video showed him complaining that his wife refused to cook and that it forced him to eat pizza all the time. If you're not sure who Pastor John Gray is, don't feel too bad. He's wildly famous in the Christian community and one of the most popular pastors in America on social media. He has over 1 million followers and many consider him a big deal. According to Larry Reed, there's rumored to be a third time Gray's been caught cheating. Vlogger and social media star Tasha K, as seen on her Unwind with Tasha K show, provided new details and obtained more specifics from a third woman whose name is supposedly Mary. He's also apparently an enormous liar. He preaches about building trust, and yet scores of people have accused him of repeatedly cheating on his spouse. And each time he gets caught, he goes on social media and cries about how the public have betrayed him and how rumors are evil. 3. Tickets to heaven. Authorities arrested a pastor from Zimbabwe for selling tickets to heaven. It was 2018, and Pastor Tito Watts had a great idea about how to make a few extra bucks. He and his wife Amanda scammed people into purchasing $500 tickets that would get them straight past the gates of heaven with no holy judgment. They could walk straight into heaven even if they'd just committed a dozen mortal sins. That's how good these tickets were. I do not care what people or the police are saying about me. I'm being persecuted because of doing the work of God, the pastor said, according to Zimbabwean news outlets. Jesus Christ appeared to me and gave me the tickets made of pure gold so that I can sell them to people who want salvation, he added. News reports claim that thousands of people are protesting Pastor Tito Watts' arrest. Followers demanded the police to release him immediately. According to the pastor, Jesus Christ himself was the one who appeared to him and gave him the tickets. The amazing event took place behind a KFC. Jesus supposedly said to sell the tickets to people who needed salvation, and so of course, that's exactly what the pastor did. But the police had other ideas about what the pastor was doing. He was outed as a scam artist. When the police arrested him, they confiscated over $10,000 in cash, crack cocaine paraphernalia, and perhaps the strangest of all, a baby alligator. 2. Locking up the disabled. The police caught a pastor in Georgia holding 8 disabled people in his basement against their will. He and his wife were both arrested in early 2022 for running an illegal group home. The police arrived at the residence in Griffin, a small town about an hour from Atlanta. They were there because of a report that somebody was having a seizure, but the police were forced to climb through a window because the couple had bolted the basement entrance shut. When the cops got into the basement room, they found 8 disabled people who admitted to being imprisoned by their supposed caretakers, Pastor Keith Bankston and his wife Sophia. The police investigation that followed revealed the pastor and his wife operated an unlicensed group home. They also operated a fake church called One Step of Faith Second Chance. Curtis wasn't even the pastor of a legitimate church, but the fake one he made up to earn some extra money. The couple had been leasing the property for about 14 months, using the basement to keep the disabled people prisoner. While the disabled people were stuck in the basement, the couple was in full control of their finances. They denied them their medication and used the money for themselves, and took advantage of people who were in a helpless situation. Thankfully, police arrested both these crooks and charged them with false imprisonment. 1. Fraud against the elderly. Eric Dion Reedon was a pastor from Miami Gardens in Florida. He found himself handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit in early 2022 for defrauding the elderly. As if the last pastor who kept disabled people in his basement wasn't bad enough, here we have another pastor, a few states over, taking advantage of old folks. Eric is now facing charges of organized fraud, exploitation of the elderly, and grand theft. The Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office says the pastor took advantage of a man named Edward Fuller, 76 years old. He was trying to get a mortgage to finish work on his home, and so Eric introduced himself as a pastor. Eric said that for $15,000, he would give Edward a loan to complete the rest of the construction. Instead, Eric took the $15,000 and ownership of the home. Eric, a pastor at the New Beginning Missionary Baptist Church, agreed to help the senior citizen and then stole his house. He left the old man with no home and thousands of dollars worth of debt. Thankfully, someone alerted the authorities to what the pastor did and they promptly arrested him. Everything he stole equals about $267,000. Would you rather find out your pastor was a secret murderer or had a boyfriend in France and was planning to elope? Let me know which would be more devastating in the comments, and thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and I'll see you soon for another shocking video. Bye.